Greetings, YouTube. Alan Lube. It's been a while. I haven't been posting too many videos recently, and that's because I've been pretty busy with stuff outside of Flesh and Blood. And US Nats also just happened. I went to travel there. Did not do well at all. Don't want to talk about it too much, but basically I played Bravo and I got wrecked because I didn't have enough time to prepare, / didn't prioritize preparing too much. And yeah, that's basically what happened. But now I'm back with a nice little tier list / post nationals meta analysis. So nothing too much has changed from my pre-nationals tier list. I definitely disrespected Icelander a bit, but yeah, let's get right into it. And be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks. So best decks in the format are definitely Icelander and Oldhim. Oldhim is just like not super simple to play, but like if you're on the fatigue Oldhim strat, it's like not too bad to play Rampart and Crown and just like turtle out for the most part. Guardian Mirrors are probably your most skill-intensive matchups, but everything else is pretty self-explanatory for the most part. And that's no disrespect. There's definitely a lot of skill expression in Oldhim, and you know, just picking up the deck for the first time doesn't mean you're going to top or anything. But yeah, I think Oldhim is like very powerful at what he does, and it's not too complex to figure out certain lines. Whereas I think Icelander is extremely complex to figure out the right lines, and is also punishing and rewarding to play a hero with such high complexity. But I do think Icelander is basically truly the hero with no bad matchups, but a lot of close matchups, and because of that, she's just very powerful. She has game into basically every hero, and sure, you can maybe target her. I'm not even sure how you would target her, but she's just very strong. We even saw Michael Hamilton's list run attack actions like Wounded Bull, E-Strike, Finals Fighting Spirit, which was very powerful into Oldhim's as well because you could trade efficiently, and once both players were in single digits, Icelander just thrives there. So Icelander and Oldhim, in my opinion, are the two best decks in the format. But moving on, I would say Fai and Briar have a lot of game also. In my opinion, I think Fai is better than Briar in the current meta and also head-to-head. But I can't argue with the results of the national seasons too much, that Briar just performed better overall. Fai had very high representation, but didn't really perform too well. But he did well at US Nats. He had 2 tops, but across the whole national seasons, he wasn't great. But I think a lot of that may have to a lot of that may be due to the fact that Briar was so heavily played during the PT France season that post PT France or post Prism meta, Briar was still just heavily represented. A lot of strong players on Briar. So in my opinion, I honestly think Briar is like a tier down from Fai. I think Fai has better game into the Ice Heroes and is just better overall. Well, he has one worse matchup than Briar, and I would say that's Bravo and maybe even Dory. But considering the representation of those two decks, I would say Fai is like the better pick. But I'll just leave them both in S tier for now. I do think Oldhim and Icelander are just a step above these two, but these two are also very good at what they do. So moving on to A tier, I have Viscerai. Viscerai has always, or not always, but like these past few seasons has felt just a step behind Briar. Just the fact that, you know, his damage output is still great. He has insane turns with like Revel and Mordred, but the fact that he just needs more cards to do what he does means that he can often just get disrupted too much by like Oldhim, Bravo, Icelander, you name it. Whereas Briar and Fai are just better at pushing more damage consistently and off less cards. So I would say Viscerai is still a strong hero, but just not one of the best. Dash. Hard to say. Dash is fine. Dash has the game plan of going aggro or going like defensive with items, and we saw the defensive list do well at US Nats, beating all the Oldhims basically. But it's a very targeted strategy. And the problem with Dash just seems like you can either have a good matchup into aggro with full boost and stuff, or you can have a good matchup into Oldhim. And I'm not even sure you beat Icelander either way, but Dash seems fine. I wouldn't say she's an amazing pick, but I would say she's a good pick. And there's probably a lot of tech choices you can make or how to build your deck to keep your opponents on their feet. Dromai is weird because honestly I don't think Dromai is very good, but she's pretty highly represented and she usually performs okay. She might not top very often, but she does, you know, you do consistently see, not consistently, but you do see Dromais at the top tables like for the most part. Might just be like because she's so highly represented, but I do think Dromai has good play into Oldhim and Icelander, but she definitely struggles into the aggro decks, and well, she basically struggles into every other deck for the most part, but she has play into Icelander and Oldhim, which are basically the two best decks. The issue I see is if more players begin to pivot towards a deck list like Michael Hamilton's that run Wounded Bull and Finals Fighting Spirit, that's like a lot of natural poppers that Dromai will have to deal with. So I don't know. It's hard to say. Some people say the matchup's 50-50. Some people say it's Dromai favored. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, but I do think Dromai is like a fine pick. Moving on to Bravo, my main guy. Honestly, Bravo is B tier. I think Bravo can perform very well, and also in the hands of a good pilot, aka not mine, he can perform very well, even top. He's very solid in his like fundamental play patterns, and while there's no surprises, he has like a lot of game into everybody. But I think it's important to note that his worst matchups are Oldhim and Icelander. Oldhim is definitely a lot of a big skill matchup, and you can definitely beat Oldhim's. But I would say in the hands of two players that are equally skilled, Oldhim will usually squeak out the win. Bravo has a good matchup into Fai. It's not like free like everyone says like it was before. I do think Fai can still win that matchup, especially now that, you know, they have better blocks, they have more armor. It's not like they're running Stubbies, Lynx, you know, Blossom of Spring every game anymore. So I do think the matchup is closer. But in my opinion, I think Bravo's best matchup is Dromai. But Dromai usually doesn't perform too well at events because losing to the Oldhims and Icelanders in the aggro decks. So I think Bravo's just B tier. I think he's good and he has a shot, but he's just not quite there. I would put Dory up here also. I would say Dory. So if you ran Hatchet's Dory, you would have a pretty solid matchup in Oldhim, but then you would lose to a lot of other things. If you run Dawnblade Dorinthea, you can race aggro decks and beat things like Dromai by hitting their dragons, but then you kind of run into problems with the Guardians and Icelander. So Dory's in a bit of a tough spot. If you had like infinite sideboard and can run like Hatchets and Dawnblade, then I think Dory would be amazing, but I mean, you can't, so it is what it is. Moving on, Reiner. Reiner is interesting because some people will say Reiner's best matchup is, or Reiner has a good matchup in Icelander. Some people will say Reiner has a bad matchup into Icelander. I personally don't know. I just think he probably has some kind of play. You know, he can play, or he can get through the defensive Oldhims. I'm sure he has some game into Icelander, but I'm not 100% sure. But his worst matchups are definitely the aggro decks. But if Ice keeps aggro down enough, then Reiner can definitely beat the control decks. If you're playing against like a defensive dash 2, Reiner just absolutely thrives there. I assume Reiner also has a good matchup into Dromai. You have a lot of poppers, and you have a lot of things that naturally, or that let you leak damage through with Intimidate. So I imagine Dromai is a good matchup, but I actually don't know for sure. Moving on to C tier, this is kind of honestly where I just put everyone else that I think is like okay, but like not great. Like I would put Katsu, Levia, Lexi, Kano in here. Honestly, I might even put Kano in D tier. I don't think Kano's very good right now. And then Azalea Bolton. So let's talk about these real quick. Katsu, I mean, maybe even Katsu can go up to B tier. Like, I think Katsu can do pretty well. He has a lot of very powerful on hits and can push through a lot of damage with the surging Whelming Mugenshi Lord of Wind line. But I don't know. I'll put him in C tier. But yeah, I think if you wanted to play an aggro deck, you're better off playing Briar or Fai. But that doesn't mean I don't think Katsu can do well. I think Katsu's fine, but yeah, just once again, I don't think he's great. He probably can't really push over defensive Oldhims too well, and he'll probably have a good matchup into like defensive dash or Dromai, but like a lot of decks have good matchups into defensive dash and Dromai. So Lexi, not really sure, to be honest. I don't know how Lexi plays into this new ice meta. She can do well against the aggro decks, as we all know, but I have absolutely no idea how she does into Icelander or Dromai, but I don't imagine it's too great. So, and then Levia, Levia seems fine. I feel like you would rather play Reiner in this current meta, just because the meta is pretty slow and controlling. That Intimidate actually matters. In an aggressive meta, we saw that Reiner's Intimidate usually doesn't matter versus aggro decks, but now that the meta is slower and has more control aspects, like Intimidate actually does matter. So I feel like Reiner's just better than Levia, but all these decks in C tier I can still imagine like doing well or popping up out of nowhere, but I don't really know personally how it would happen. Kano I think is just not great right now, just because Icelander is like one of the best decks and people are prepared for arcane damage. I don't think Kano's gonna pop off at all. Bolton is just absolutely horrendous into ice. Like imagine trying to get off double Lumina into like Blizzard, Frostbite, Channel Lake Frigid from Icelander or something. That doesn't seem great at all. And then Azalea, once again, I have no idea, but Azalea. I mean, she did top that one Nationals. I forgot which one. But yeah, I don't think Azalea will do much this meta either. So this is how I feel about the meta, like post Nats. I wouldn't say things are too much different from what I expected. It was definitely some copium to put Bravo in A tier. It was definitely some disrespect to put Icelander in B tier when she's like clearly one of the best decks right now. But all of this can change from LSS if they do something during the banned and restricted announcement coming out soon. I think it's a hard situation because the meta overall, I feel like, is in a pretty good spot. Like there's control decks, there's aggro decks, there's mid-range decks, there's a lot of, different matchups you have to prepare for, and it's like a very open meta in my opinion. But you can't deny that like Oldhim with Crown of Seeds and blocking out the entire game is like not exactly something you want to see very prevalent in the meta. So it's possible that they might touch Crown of Seeds. I think the Oldhim deck is still okay. Little jump cut edit right there. Sorry about that. Had to do something. But as I was saying, basically they can touch Crown of Seeds on Oldhim to like try and stop the fatigue meta from happening, or like the attrition game, which leads to a lot of draws and it's not a very, great play experience for a lot of people. But I do worry if they do that, I still think Oldhim's going to be a good deck. I think Oldhim with like Tectonic plus like Crown of Providence and Stalagmite is still going to be very good. But I think that the issue with potentially touching Crown of Seeds is that the meta might overreact, and we might see like, actually, honestly, I don't know. They could pick either way. You could argue that Crown of Seeds is a legendary and you don't really want to touch it, but at the same time, it's like you could probably touch Crown of Seeds and the game and meta will still probably feel good as a whole. So I don't really know. We'll see in a week what LSS decides to do. But yeah, this is my thoughts on the meta. Going forward, I have like some video ideas coming up, especially like a big video I'm planning, but it's going to take me a while to edit, so bear with me on that one. But yeah, this is my little meta analysis / tier list. In terms of the tiers, I don't think the tiers are honestly too important. They're kind of just like a way for me to outline like how I feel about each hero and their like matchups overall. Like you could still bring a C tier deck to like whatever event and still do well, but like this is just like my honest thoughts on like evaluating their matchup spreads as a whole and seeing like what the best pick would be if you wanted to win an event. So yeah, that's all from me, and I'll see you next time.